Thank you, Prince Cedza, for this interview. What brings you here to Kent, actually?
I, first of all, want to thank you for having me here today. It's my first time, and I am so excited. I am here for a number of reasons. One is to deliver the Reed Distinguished Lecture this evening, at 7 o'clock at the Kiva, to speak about the United Nations Millennium Development Goals and looking at how young people can get involved in helping us achieve these really important goals, which are the 8 goals that were agreed upon by the world leaders in the year 2000. And we're in the halfway mark now. 2015 is supposed to be the halfway point, and we need to be more aggressive in trying to achieve these goals. So then another reason is to develop opportunities for service learning programs between Kent State and South Africa and the SADC region. My organization, the Ubuntu Institute, runs student exchange programs, and we're hoping that we can provide opportunities for students and faculty here in the Southern African region. Yeah.
Right. In most of your programs, you have focused on youth.
Right.
And you have talked about Ubuntu and the spirit of community.
Yes.
How does that contrast to what you have seen here in the United States from your own experience?
Well, as you would know, I mean, as an international student in the United States, we were talking, you miss the food at home, you miss small things, the music, the way of life, and a lot of our cultures outside of the US, in Asia and in Africa, communal in nature. So that means that this concept, which we call Ubuntu, is a way of life for Africans. And what it means is that we are all interconnected. It means that I am because you are. It means that a stranger can go into someone's house and they will be given food and a bed to sleep, and it won't be a problem. So coming from that background and living in the United States, especially in a place like Boston, which is cold, it was my first time to hear about -0 or -2 degrees weather, and then people not relating to you in a way that people would be at home. So the culture here is characterized by an individualistic society and way of life. So I think initially it was very difficult for me to sort of, bump into someone in the street and try and say hello to them, and they wouldn't respond back because they don't know me, which is something that's normal to do at home. But eventually I realized that the key really is to the balance of the individualistic cultures and communal cultures, because even our cultures have got their own weaknesses too. I think it's just a question of adaptability and bring the best of the individualistic cultures and the best of communal cultures to create a new world order that is not either one of the extremes.
What has been the kind of response when you go out and talk to youth?
Yes.
And especially, it looks like you have been concentrating much on educational institutions, and you have gone out, especially in the US, that your campaign has started since 2007, I think. So what has been the response at this point of time?
Right. Well, the way that we would measure the response is through our exchange program. So I would go and deliver a lecture at a university, at a high school, and different schools would respond differently. There's some that would appreciate the information from an educational perspective because it was the first time they were hearing about the MDGs. You'd be surprised how many young people have never heard of the UN Millennium Development Goals. So there's that level, which is good, just for people to be educated. Then they can be directed to UN websites or just projects that they could be involved in. And then you have another group, which is a group that is inspired to do more now that they've heard about the goals. And those are the people through our exchange programs that have an opportunity to actually travel to South Africa or to Swaziland to be involved in community development projects. Now, I always insist that people don't have to go to Africa to make a difference. They can make a difference in Latin America and Asia, even right here in the backyard. It's just we get so caught up with so many other things that we sort of forget that there's so much for us to do in terms of giving back. And it's good to speak to young people early on to build a sense of community and civic participation. So I would say overall the response has been extremely positive. I don't remember a single place where someone said I was crazy or they didn't think what I was talking about. But also, I think also an important point to mention is that, you know, it's important to walk the talk. You know, it's one thing to go and tell people that they should do something if you're not doing it. So I think, you know, in my own life, I live that practice. You know, I could be in business making money or living a very comfortable life, but I chose to live a life of wanting to give back and to give back of my time. So I think that's important. That I can live what I talk about.
You have often complained about the negativity of the media and other people about in portraying the African life.
Right.
What is that specifically bothers you?
Well, I think there's a number of things. One is some people say ignorance is bliss. I think ignorance comes at a very huge price. We are living in a highly globalized world, and when people are going into jobs and are going into different environments, and as the impact of technology increases in the world, people will be sort of forced to know a little bit about Africa, a little bit about the rest of the world. And the media is a huge gatekeeper, and I think they certainly have a big role to play in portraying a balanced view. And by balance, we mean not just a negative view, but also a positive view. And the former U.S. ambassador to the United States, Charles Stith, who is the head of the African Presidential Research Center, always says that Africa is more than the sum of its problems. And that's a very powerful statement, because that means that there's so many positive things. And he always talks about, for example, how you have over 16 countries on the African continent that are fully democratic countries. And yet the media portrays Africa as undemocratic, as ungovernable. And yet if you track a lot of African countries, there's been a lot of progress. And so has been a lot of progress in China, in Asia and in Latin America. That the media has not been able to cover. Now, that's one aspect. There's obviously an educational aspect, which is making sure that the academic institutions, high school level, primary school level, are teaching about Africa, are teaching about the rest of the world. So we need to have an impact on the curriculum, so that we don't expect people who are graduating from these institutions who have not learned anything, and for that matter, maybe have learned the opposite, which is maybe the underdevelopment of the continent, to be the people that are working in the media houses or the future leaders of this country. So I think it's too late to even start at media. You need to start at an earlier point. And this is part of why I'm here, is to speak about and educate a little bit more about some of the positive aspects in Africa, and for people to see a young person like myself who can speak English. Sometimes people ask you, where did you go to school? How can you speak such good English? And I say all my education was in Africa, except for my university life, which was at Tufts University in Boston. But prior to that, I knew how to speak English. I didn't walk from Africa to the US. And these are small things that go very far when you meet someone who is not engaged Africa in a curriculum structured sort of process. So I think each one of us can be a light for our countries, and we can be ambassadors that can try and provide more of a balanced view.
I find it very